I can teach you how to bewitch the mind and ensnare the senses. I can tell you how to bottle fame, brew glory, and even put a stopper in death.
Welcome to Snape Chat, the voice of the Snapedom, the podcast where we discuss all things Snape, always. Join us as we dive into the world of the bravest man we ever knew, in art, fanfic, meta, and more. Obviously. This is Snapecentric with episode 38. We're celebrating Alan Rickman's birthday by discussing the Snapey content of all 8 Harry Potter films. I'm joined by Irem, Amelia, Hal, and Masao for a really fun conversation. Enjoy the show. This is Snapecentric, and I'm here with Hal.
That's me. Hello.
Masao.
Hi there.
And our 2 special guests, Irem.
Hi.
And Amelia.
Hello.
Yeah. And we're talking about Snape in the movies, particularly Alan Rickman's performance. And so we're going to start at the beginning and go right through all the films. And I don't know how long this is going to take. So,
all right. So we're starting with Sorcerer's Stone. Is that the idea?
That's the idea. Yeah.
Awesome.
Also
okay.
known as Philosopher's Stone.
I was just going to say that. We started with the Philosopher's Stone.
How did they say it where you are, Amelia?
Well, the original.
Do they say sorcerers or philosophers?
Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah, it's definitely the fact this movie was made in America. They went with Sorcerer's Stone.
That's what I was figuring.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least it was made with American money.
Yes. It wasn't actually made in America. It was...
Yeah, no, I think it was filmed here. They wanted it to do it here.
Right. Yeah, they made a lot of it very authentic to the actual setting, but Warner Brothers is an American company, and yeah, a lot of the money and power behind it came from the American film industry.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I know in Japanese it was like wise person's stone, so I guess that's closer to philosopher.
Mm-hmm. So in any case, I'm looking at some of the comments from the survey. So this is cool. Snapecentric sent out this survey. All the listeners know that this happened.
Yeah.
And there were a bunch of metrics taken for like the amount and quality of Snape content, Alan Rickman's interpretation of Snape, the iconic Snape moments, the sexiness/thirst factor, his voice, sarcasm, and sass, the billow and diva moves, and hair costume, as well as just a free comment field. So we have a lot of great stuff that we kind of crowdsourced from the community. So we hopefully have a lot of great content to talk about today.
Yes, we had over 40 respondents, which is wonderful. Thank you, Snapedom, for that. And real shout out to Serena EW, who helped me spread the word on that. So, okay, what I figured was we'd go to this little recap film and mostly watch the scenes through that. A couple of them I've broken out into separate ones, but then we can talk about each scene. I actually went through and I watched all of them, and I did timestamps every time he was on screen.
Nice.
But they actually have the amount of FaceTime someone is on the screen. So I was able to get that for Alan.
That's handy.
Yeah.
Does this one have the most? Like out of all the movies, the first one, I seem to recall it was a lot more screen time than the others.
Actually, no.
Oh, no, really? Oh.
Let's see. I'll get to my spreadsheet here.
The last one.
Oh, of course. The last one would be.
The last one. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And also Half-Blood Prince had more.
Oh,
well, I
yeah,
would hope
makes
so.
sense.
I
Yeah.
mean...
It's called the Half-Blood Prince.
Let's go ahead, and I think the first scene here is just his first. Okay, he sees.
It should be the feast, right? The welcome feast.
I think
Yeah,
so.
when Harry's like, "Who's that teacher?"
Oh, I need to share screen here because I'm sorry.
All right. I hate to be that guy, but do we really need to watch all the scenes?
Well,
we could, just for like our eyes.
Well, I mean, besides the whole like listening format,
mhm.
I don't know. I think we already have a lot of great content in that survey. A lot of people know what's in, especially these first couple movies.
Okay.
Yeah, not to rain on the parade, but this could also get really long if we're doing a breakdown scene by scene.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I do think starting with the very first scene is important. Like that first look when they're across the Great Hall from each other, and you get that first notion of like, who is that guy? And maybe there's something sinister happening because Harry's scar hurts. And then you realize much later that's a red herring.
Mm-hmm.
So that is my favorite thing about Snape's role in the first book is he's almost entirely meant to be a red herring.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think if Harry had a bit more insight and if he had grown trusting adults, he might have been able to see beyond it. But as it stands, he couldn't. Because his main thing when Snape was put the referee, it wasn't maybe the guy is trying to protect me because I almost died at the last game. He's like, he tried to kill me. It didn't even cross their minds. He's a teacher. He might notice I'm in danger. He might doing a contacus. Like none of them ever thought about it. It was from the start. He's the one cursing Harry.
I think that the referee scene from the book is the one thing that people commented on in the survey as a missing Snape moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's in there, but it's not particularly dramatic. Like,
nothing happens.
Yeah. And this is the thing. So I went into this thinking, just personal taste. I'm a much bigger fan of the books than the movies. I read the books first and I read them in quick succession before I ever saw the movies. But it's really helpful for me to think of like book Snape and movie Snape as like two different people and have like different expectations for them. Because one of the things that, people talk about, like, well, what did you miss seeing in the movies? Snape just didn't freak out enough in the movies, I think. He freaked out a lot more in the books, and I really enjoyed that about his character. Alan Rickman is such a cool, collected, suave kind of guy that he's going to play him differently, so it's kind of a different character.
I mean, Alan played the sheriff, like he could have played someone unhinged, but I think the vision was slightly different.
Yeah,
in the movies, I got the idea that Alan was playing like this perfect calculated spy.
Right.
Like he had already hidden behind the wall on necromancy. Like he was really untouchable, rarely showing emotion type. Like he was already prepared for the role.
Right. And what's also interesting to me is that I feel like and if you agree, I don't know. I feel like the way he plays Snape in the first 3.5 kind of movies is almost a different character than the second half of the movies. Like he's a lot more camp in the first few movies, and in the second half of the movies, it's becoming a more, I guess, emotional story. But again, it's still like a different character from the books.
Yes, I agree with the camp thing. I think that might also have some director influence. Chris Columbus on the first two films, I think definitely gave us very magic, and the comic relief was a little bit different in those two versus all the others. And it's so campy, in fact, that one of my favorite Harry Potter films, probably my favorite Harry Potter film, is actually the dub over of Wizard People, Dear Reader, where just the narrator dials up all the camp to 11, and you don't even miss Alan's voice. It's so funny. Like that's how funny it is.
I haven't seen that. I'll have to check that out.
Oh my gosh, it's so good.
Seems like Jal has to stream it.
Yeah, I have a copy somewhere. Warner Brothers doesn't really like it when you sync that audio to the film and leave it lying around the internet.
Yeah.
So you might have to get it in less than reputable ways, but you can also just get the audio separately because that's just a good fan work, and then you can sync it yourself too.
Right. Yeah. I do really enjoy Alan's like physical acting that goes into the first movies where, he's playing Snape.
Yeah.
And he's got a mannerism to him that I really enjoy, that it's unique, to the movies, but it's fun. And, I do kind of wish that got incorporated later on, but I understand that different directors, and then there was like a big tone shift too.
Yeah. His physicality is what I wanted to mention next too, because we started with the scene of like being that first scene where they see each other across the Great Hall, and then I think the next scene is the classroom scene.
Yeah,
we're introduced to potions, and it is so engrossing physically. The way that door bangs open and his robes are billowing. That's probably like why we think of the billowing robes as so iconic, and we wanted to get a measure of that through all the movies in the survey.
Right.
Is that kind of, that's what some people think of is the first scene with him, rather than the one across the Great Hall during the welcome feast.
Right.
And even when he's doing his kind of opening speech, he's doing something with his robes. Like, I'm making a hand motion as if you can see me, right? But it's very
we're all
sassy.
seeing it. We're all seeing it on our head.
It's very sassy,
Later watching it, he's sort of wrapping himself up.
Yes.
Like to protect himself.
Yeah.
Like, even though he's doing all this really out there camp or whatever you want to say, there's also some insecurity there.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of interesting because like he's doing it with the energy of a fashion model, but it is like a protective gesture.
Yeah.
That is correct. Like, I always get the impression like he's making it, like his eyes are like worry, but at the same time he's doing it seductively in a way.
Yes.
And it's like stands like he's talking with Lily's son. So I think that plays into it. He's feeling vulnerable, but at the same time he's also Potter's son. So he's like conflicted over it.
Mm-hmm.
I like that the word seductive came out. I feel like a lot of us fell in love with Snape because of that scene. I mean, I loved him from early in the books anyway.
Yeah, I did.
Same.
But I think a large portion of the fandom fell in love with him in that moment, and partly due to Alan's portrayal. And there's nothing wrong with that. One thing that I have a little beef with in some areas of the fandom is people will be like, "Oh, you only like Snape because of Alan Rickman."
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah, I hate that too.
Okay, it's like, so what? Even if that was true,
right?
Which is not for all of us,
right?
But even for those it is true. So what? We like Alan Rickman.
Yeah, I mean, it happens in a lot of other movies. Like, recently that Ballad of Song and Snakes, of Songbirds and Snakes. I can't remember the name. Coriolanus is a terrible person, but because the actor playing it is hot, they're like, maybe he's a cute murderer.
But I do know people definitely liked him before that. That's the other thing. Like, not that there's anything wrong with that, but like, I don't know. We're not like, oh, you only like Sirius because Gary Oldman is neat or whatever. Like, that would be so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually that, is the thing. Or like, if you have, it's people like don't realize it's not just the actor that makes the role for a lot of fans. Yeah. What do you think, Irem? Or Irem?
Yes, it's Irem. But you can just call me whatever you feel comfortable with. I think I hate the idea that people like Snape because of Alan Rickman. For me, my love for Snape came like very later on. Like after I read the books, after I watched the movies. I really didn't like him at the beginning. I started to love him because of Severus Hermione's story. So like Alan Rickman didn't have any kind of influence on me, even though I love him as an actor. So when people say that you like him because of Alan Rickman, I just cringe because like I think except Snape or Draco, no other character is accused of getting love because of the actor or the actress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I really hate the idea, and I'm like the living example of that not being the case. And like not everyone is as shallow as you to love a character just because of an actor, like.
Yeah, I don't want to talk down too much about other fans, but I do feel like maybe it's a failure of imagination.
Yeah.
Right? We have so much potential in these characters. And especially somebody that's like this guy who's been a spy for decades.
Mm-hmm.
We really don't know. We don't know. So we can make it up and we can have a good time with it.
Well, and I'm sure, like, ask any Snape fan, like, why they first like Snape, and you're going to get a spectrum of different answers, you know?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's funny. I forgot that we were, for a moment, doing this in the morning. I made a post last night about why I first fell in love with Snape, like, very early on when I started reading the books, and I was just like, oh, who is this cunty little bitch? I love him.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The sass level. Oh my gosh. That is one of the measurements we took on the survey. Let's see.
Yeah.
On Sorcerer's
Yeah.
Stone, what did we put? We got a pretty high score on sarcasm and sass.
He's just so immediately extra for no reason.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Mhm.
And like, if you've ever seen, like, especially about the first book / movie, people talk about, like, he's actively trying to come off as cool and scary to a bunch of 11-year-olds. And there's something very, like, almost
Yeah,
cute about that.
Uh-huh.
He's like he's got something to prove. You can tell, despite how calculated and calm Alan Snape
Uh-huh.
is, by his action, he's still that kid that's trying to show up to Potter. Even if it's his child, he's like proving himself.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, yeah, for voice, sarcasm, and sass, which I put all into one thing, this one averaged 4.6, which was the highest
Yeah.
out of all the 8 movies.
Yeah, out of the 42 respondents, we've got 31 gave it 5 out of 5.
Mhm. I think I did. I think I
Yeah.
did.
Same.
Yeah.
I think, it's kind of hard. I think I did for the second movie as well, because I mean, like, not to get ahead of ourselves, but it continues into that.
Yeah, I think the last note I have that I really wanted to discuss about the first movie was the missing potions riddle at the end.
Oh my god, that was so annoying.
Yeah.
We didn't get to see Snape's poetry.
I know. I feel like that says so much about him.
Mhm.
I also noted that it's kind of an important clue that he's maybe not a pureblood wizard
Mhm.
because of what Hermione had to say about, like, wizards don't really get logic the same way that muggles do.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And yeah, that poetry is so brilliant too.
It's a missed opportunity to have it read in Alan's voice while Hermione is looking at it.
Ooh.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That would have been fun.
Yeah.
Or even if he was left entirely out of it and you're supposed to piece it together yourself later that it was his, it still would have been better than not having it.
Well, and it's fun character development too, because
Yes.
yeah, like, it goes from, like, oh man, this guy is just, like, completely extra and, like, so mean for no reason, and then you get to this part and you're like, oh my god, and he's a nerd.
Uh-huh. It was also, I described that poem as threatening but non-violent.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I think is why I call it brilliant. I mean, the man is brilliant. I call him that a lot. But this poem in particular really shows it because of that level of threat in it. And yet, because it's a puzzle, the person, like, if they poison themselves, it's their own damn fault. They
Right,
couldn't figure
right.
out the puzzle. Like, too bad.
Right.
I'm sure he had fun making it.
Oh my gosh, yes. I may have written some fanfic where he has the draft and a bunch of it is scribbled out and written over, and yeah.
You just gave me a visual, like someone drawing him and like head over desk, and he's like, maybe he's like having a copy, and underneath that, I would poison students if I put that one. Like, he knows they will look for it, like some underconscious. It's like, people will die if I use that riddle. And then he's like, maybe they should if they're trying to steal this stuff.
Yeah, it just occurred to me that wizards don't understand logic as well. It's because they don't use the scientific method.
Yeah.
For sure.
And I think that's interesting. Like, this is a bit meta maybe, but a lot of the potions that exist in the wizarding world, not invented or perfected by Snape, are kind of weird and random and useless. Like, there are so many that just, like, make you vaguely confused, or, like, I don't know. And the spells too. And it's interesting to see that the potions and spells that Snape has a hand or totally creates himself are some of the most useful, in the wizarding world.
Yeah.
Or very impactful, if not widely useful, like Wolfsbane potion.
Yes.
He maybe only makes that for a couple people the whole time, and it's extremely impactful. So yeah, maybe not useful to everybody, but for those who it's useful for, wow.
Even the spells that already exist that are his favorite, like Expelliarmus, are some of the most useful.
I think that's mostly Harry's favorite, but it's like the one thing that Harry learned from Snape is like how to defend himself. Like Expelliarmus becomes his catchphrase. Like that's how impressed Harry was with Snape.
Yeah.
He only used that spell, like some subliminal level. Harry understood that Snape was the better teacher.
Well, and it's sort of, a non-violent way to end a fight,
Right. There it is again, non-violent,
exactly,
but still very powerful. Yes. And that makes a great segue into the second movie, if we're ready for that, because I think a lot of the commenters on it said that their favorite scene is the dueling scene.
Yes.
Yeah. Dueling scene with Lockhart, Lockhart being obliterated. And and I wrote dueling scene with Lockhart as well. Oh, there's another Lockhart thing. Yeah, so the interaction between Snape and Lockhart in that movie appears to be the fan favorite. Yeah, it's a moment where you really see him put a true Dunderhead in his place. So I think that really got to some of us. Yeah.
I mean, everyone with a brain could tell that Lockhart wasn't really it.
I couldn't in the beginning.
It's just surface shiny dude.
I just remember seeing that scene for the first time because, again, like I just read like up to like book 5 before I started watching the movies, and like he's coming out, he's on a runway, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is incredible. He's flouncing, he's doing all this stuff. He's on a runway. It's incredible.
It's like he's purposefully matching Lockhart, because Lockhart is this very flamboyant guy, and he's like, I'm the best, I defeated all these people. So it's like Snape is matching for a bit his energy, and then goes back to himself as soon as Lockhart is like up his ass and defeated.
I think the one bummer about this for me is that, it's one of those things where because of the ages of the casting, you don't realize that, oh, they're both like the young professors and they're very similar in age. And like, a lot has been made about the fact that Lockhart would have been a student during Snape's first year of teaching, and also would have been a student when he was a student, and a lot of that falls away, and you're missing some of the nuance of why they like have the weird animosity between them.
Precisely. This is very different when that person used to be your peer and now you're looking at them and you know how they were, and it's like, I don't believe you for a second.
Right. Snape knows this guy is full of it because he knows him.
Yeah. Some of you know that I am an educator. And when I first started teaching, I was 5 years out of school. So I was a little bit beyond even what, a traditional first year teacher would be in closeness of age, but still it felt like a little close, and the kids knew it too, and they would push boundaries in ways that they probably wouldn't with an older teacher. And yeah, I mean, the most dicey it got was the ones who found out I had just finished college and had my super senior year because it took forever. And they told me, they would ask, like, did you party? And so that makes me wonder, what questions would they have had for Snape?
I can't imagine him having to teach the children who witnessed the Marauders bully him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That must have been fundamentally changing for his character.
I like to imagine that Lockhart was a jerk about it during Snape's first year of teaching, and, tried to humiliate him to the younger students, which adds a little more satisfaction when he just absolutely destroys him in the duel and is constantly like cheesing on him, like, oh, well, thank goodness you're here then. You can deal with this.
There's another sarcasm and sass for us.
Right.
Which this one was also highly rated on the survey.
I mean,
Oh man.
Yeah. One thing I found weird is that at that scene where Ginny has just been abducted and Snape and McGonagall still can, give Lockhart all this shit,
Right, yeah.
Yep.
That's kind of,
I love that.
they're like, she's being kidnapped. We don't know what to do about it, but let's get this guy out of here so we can actually think.
yeah.
And they're extremely funny about it. Like, I think that's probably where a lot of people headcanoning them as being like good friends. It might stem from, that moment a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, some of the comments on this second film also mention his look, the costuming, the hair, the whole overall look for Alan in this film. And
Mhm.
I would say it was I don't know, it was all right. I am so much more, I'm attracted to that voice and that mind that I honestly don't remember.
I remember his wig looking different from movie to movie, but I can't
Yeah.
connect a look to movie specifically.
Yeah.
I just remember sometimes it's very bouncy and has a lot of body.
Mhm. And then, sometimes it's sort of helmet-like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, here's a good comment. Snape-wise, it's really good. I would pay good money for his reaction to Lockhart's Valentine celebrations, though. Good money, I tell you.
Oh, yeah.
True.
Huh?
Snape being anti-romance, which turns up in a later movie we'll talk about.
Yeah, it's the little things that we don't get in the movie that are a shame. But I mean, I understand they probably didn't realize that there were going to be hordes of obsessed Snape fans.
Uh-huh. Well, they didn't realize how important he was going to be to the story either.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
only Alan really know. Well, it's because like he was told, otherwise he probably wouldn't have taken the role. And I also like it is a lot of scenes are missing, but in the second movie, I really like the first, like when he's talking about them being seen. You can see he's the only one that actually holds them accountable over what they did. They
Yeah.
flew a freaking car from London to Scotland. Were seen. They could have died, and they were like, "Oh, Snape is mean." They were like, "You did something wrong. You didn't think." And it's also because probably Harry stems from authority issues. Like none of them, but Ron grew up in a loving family. Couldn't he be like, "Let's wait for my parents"?
Right. Let's wait 5 minutes for them to come outside.
Yeah, it's like his parents. He should know they love him. Like they would move, probably would break the barrier to find them if they couldn't get through. And he's the one that suggested to take the car. Harry was like, "We'll wait by the car." So it's just like, it's so crazy that Dumbledore, McGonagall, they didn't talk with Harry. Why you did and why you did that. It's not good. But Snape was like, if it was up to me, you'd be on a train home. But it's not specifically say, he'd expel them. He might just like, teach them a lesson and maybe bring them back.
In the book, because I read this scene recently and I watched it, Minerva does say, like, why didn't you just owl then? But that's kind of her only contribution. And there is something very weird about the scene in the book, which I guess is implied in the movie. Snape leaves them in his office and like trusts them to eat their sandwiches and go to bed. And that's genuinely shocking to me. I would have thought he'd be more protective of his personal space.
I think you can see how, I guess it's like a hint that maybe he doesn't see that office necessarily as personal.
Yeah.
Like it's just part of the job.
Right.
And also he understands, I think, to some level that they're not out specifically to do bad stuff, to be troublemakers. Like they're not specifically out for it. Because if he thought they were out for it, I don't think he would have left them in the office. I think he would have just sent them somewhere else if they thought they were like gonna break into his office, check stuff and whatever. Like jumping maybe slightly ahead, but he's doing the same thing in the fifth book and the fifth movie. he's trusting Harry to
Exactly.
not snoop around. He's like, even like thinking this level of we don't like each other, but at some level he acknowledges that Harry is a reasonable person. And if Harry wasn't locked out by Dumbledore from so many things, probably he wouldn't have checked Snape's memories. Because
Yeah.
Harry like understood to some level those were private. So I think in the second movie book we get a hint of his logic on why he left the pensieve with Harry.
As an educator, again, I understand that my classroom is not really mine, and I lock up the valuables. And I have a closet for all the tech that I need to actually inventory, and I have a locking file cabinet for student records and paperwork. And I can't imagine Snape wouldn't, at least for things that are truly sensitive. And probably the only reason he didn't lock up the pensieve was it's kind of a pain. It's like a giant stone basin. So
Yeah.
it's not exactly easy to throw it in a closet to lock it.
And he left the office like really in a rush. I don't think he
Yes.
thought of like locking the pensieve that in that moment.
Right. That too. That's a good point.
But I also want to add that I think in the second movie, like when he leaves Harry and Ron in the office, I think he, on an unconscious level, probably recognizes that Harry he's not a like troublemaker for like
Yeah.
no reason, like Fred and George. Fred and George are like pranksters. They cause trouble for their own entertainment. I think Snape recognizes that Harry is going headfirst into trouble when he thinks it is necessary for his own reasons. He may not admit it, he may not acknowledge it, but I think he understands that Harry isn't the person to just cause mayhem for basically nothing.
Well, and I think it could also come down to, and people disagree on this because it's subtext, right? But you know, some people think that his animosity towards Harry, to at least some degree, is a cover. And I can imagine that the practical experience of having to protect this child has created some level of passive affection towards him. So yeah, it's like, that's my crappy little guy that keeps trying to get himself killed. I guess he can hang out in my office and eat sandwiches for a while.
At least my office is safe.
Yeah.
Like-
He probably won't die in here.
I think maybe that's part of the animosity. Like Snape is like, I have to protect this
Yeah.
person who keeps trying to die.
Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah, I totally understand the frustration. Like, imagine you're desperately trying to keep a person alive, and that person is literally doing anything to get themselves into dangerous situations and no thought to their own safety or anything like that. In every book, it escalates
Yeah.
even more. Like, I would be frustrated and I would be so angry. Like, I really understand his frustration with Harry's recklessness.
It's funny because it's like, it's frustrating, but it also forces him to care about him. So it's got to be like a maddening position to be in.
I feel like that's a great place to segue into the next movie, Prisoner of Azkaban.
Oh boy.
Because I was thinking in Prisoner of Azkaban, it's the fact that Snape is the only one who realizes Lupin didn't take his potion and could be dangerous. It's like, okay, he was scared probably of Lupin too, based on experience, but he's the only one who's like, if this guy doesn't take the potion, a lot of students could die because of him.
Yeah.
Like, no one else thinks to check. They just trust Lupin to take it. And there's no, like, accountability.
Right.
Well, we have this movie-specific moment in Prisoner of Azkaban where he's putting himself physically between the students and Lupin's werewolf form, which is a great visual.
And that sort of thing shows his sort of half trauma, because he's in normal, he'd probably be like, let's throw some spells at that werewolf. You know, he could have done a lot of things to the werewolf that ended up very damaging for the werewolf. But I think it's like the shock and seeing a werewolf again after so long. He can't really think of any spell, but he does the only thing he can think of to protect the kids behind him.
Which is even more impactful when you think that he does like have this trauma, like he would be afraid for his life and he's still putting it on the line for these like crappy kids.
Yeah, this movie gets a lot of a bad rap for mangling the ending and the way Snape's perspective is done, but honestly, I don't think it's that bad.
Yeah.
Making it adapted for the screen is hard.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of nuance in all of those end scenes that could be lost on the screen. The bit that I don't think would be lost on the screen is the way he rages out in the infirmary at the end. And that I do feel like should have been there, because it would have really showed that kind of more unhinged side.
Right.
Like the intense, like traumatic flashback he must be having because a Potter and a Black are getting away with.
Once again.
Yeah, once again.
I think it's because I don't quite recall, so correct me if I'm wrong, but do we see him fighting all the Dementors in the movie?
No, I don't think
No.
so.
Because
No, we only see Harry.
yeah, because the Dementors have a really bad effect on like someone's mind. So it could be like in the movie, he's not faced them as much as in the book. So he's not having that total bad memories breakdown that causes him to be so unhinged. He's more calm because he didn't face off hundreds of Dementors, and he didn't have his worst memories at the forefront. He's like sort of, he still has his mind about.
And also, I think it's just like a movie choice where they didn't want to portray him as quite as emotional as he is in the book. Like, they wanted him to have this calm, cool demeanor in the movies, and having a freak out at the end. I think also, and I've given a lot of thought to this, I think also, this is a kid's movie and we want it to wrap up with this sense of victory, and seeing Snape lose his ever-loving mind at the end kind of gets in the way of that. I can imagine it being a movie and not a book. Like, maybe kids who don't read the books are like, oh my god, this guy's just freaking out now. We're supposed to be having our like victory lap.
And maybe it'd be a tad out of character with the way Snape was portrayed over the last two movies, even if they wanted a freak out.
Right, exactly. They've established this character now that's unique to the movies, and so we can't go back now and make him a feral little beast.
True.
Yeah, and there's also like that little bit of hindsight in that as well, especially, and not just because we then finally had all the books out and whatever, because that last book hadn't been released when this movie came out.
No, yeah.
And but even just in a reread or a rewatch of this one, what would you call it, this one installment, the second time I read Prisoner of Azkaban, it was an entirely different experience than the first time I read it. Just knowing how it ends and knowing some more of that backstory of the Marauders. And I think that happens in the movies as well. When you're watching this and you go back and watch it again, you're like, oh man, that is entirely different once you know.
Can we talk a little bit about specific scenes?
Yeah. Can we talk about the Boggart scene?
Yeah.
It's not really in the commentary on this survey, but it was something I was thinking about because Alan did have to portray his own, like, Snape's Boggart as well.
Right.
And I think about that sometimes, about the flexibility of Alan Rickman as an actor. And
he pulled it off too.
He totally pulled it off.
Yeah.
He was totally Augusta Longbottom looking like Snape.
So even though we didn't rate this one very highly on all the metrics, I'm pretty sure I scored the hair and costume quite high because of that scene.
I think he was tied for 5th place or something. And I think he had a very bad response of good Snape scenes.
Yeah.
Because I think somewhere I think 5th place is like somewhere in the middle, because there's not that much on Rickman, but at the same time, it's also where it's kind of varies from the book, so it's slightly solid in between.
Yeah. And I think this, as far as the movies go, I did really like this one because obviously I like snooping, so. And I think that even the first scene where there's Snape and Remus are sitting next to each other in the Great Hall, and there's just like this animosity between them that has an energy, and I'm like, yep, they did that good. So
one of the first fanfics I ever read was a Great Snoopin' that was set during 3rd year, so it showed the backstory of everything that was happening behind the scenes that Harry didn't see in their like extreme relationship. So I would say that the 3rd movie also has kind of a special place there because it gave me some visuals to help guide what was happening in that rich backstory that you get just like inklings of in the actual
Yeah.
source material until book 7. And yeah, so we also had a lot of fun with that. Like being a fan at the time that stuff was coming out was really exciting because there weren't answers yet. So we were
Yeah.
making up our own. And I
a good
totally
time.
get that. Yeah.
Right.
I can't relate.
Now, page 394.
Oh, yeah.
Oh
of
my
course.
God.
Yes.
I just, the extended scene where it shows him closing the shutters, and you can see how tight his sleeves are.
hmm
And it just, I don't know, it just really kind of.
I like that they if I remember correctly, they kept the fact that it was like a projector that he was using in that scene.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I liked that so much that they kept that detail because it does like hint to his Muggle ancestry a little bit, because like maybe somebody else might not have used that, but he's using it.
Mhm.
And I find it highly, like, I don't believe that Hermione was the only one that took away from his lesson that Snape was a werewolf. Because, like, he was being also quite obvious. It's like, Lupin is missing. Let's talk about werewolf who have to go away for, like, 3 times a month. And, he's, like, starts talking about the werewolf, and he's like, it was wereman. And he's, like, sort of hinting all the way through the lesson, never mind the essay he says. He's, like, hinting that they know a wereman, in my opinion.
It's funny because people who don't like Snape accuse him of being petty in this moment, but I see it as him trying to actually keep the students safe, you know?
I mean, I understand the both sides because when you think about it, like he literally make them think how you can kill a werewolf. I mean, werewolves are like really dangerous.
Yeah.
1 day out of the month, but like they're human beings rest of the time. So like I can see the both sides. Like he is trying to teach them how to be safe, but also he's like really being cruel and petty at the same time because he is approaching the situation from like completely eliminating the danger in the most like drastic way.
Yeah. I want to say that I've written maybe some fanfic scenes where somebody has to take Snape to task a little bit, be like, hey, he's a normal human being 90% of his life. And for the other 10%, he takes a precaution that you brew for him. So it works. And yeah.
I think that's the only saving grace. Like, I don't personally have much love lost for the fact that Snape doesn't like Lupin much, because as I grew, as a person who's been very attached to teachers, seeing Lupin have a complete disregard for teaching and the kids he's supposed to look after because he just sees someone on the map, it shows that he was not mentally fit to be there. If he couldn't really make sure to take the potion for himself, he didn't even realize, it didn't even cross his mind it's a full moon, and that's the only thing he had to worry about. Make sure you drink the potion so you don't start killing students or turning them into yourself. As someone who had so much hate for the werewolf, he really should have been more careful. So I understand, in a way, I understand why Snape wanted the students to be aware of. I don't think he wanted them to go start killing him. I think he was afraid he would forget, and he wanted the kids to be prepared in case that happened. I think he was sure, because he really didn't trust Lupin at all. At some point, the man would forget, which is why he went back to check that night.
I mean, Snape knew Remus was reckless, like by knowing the severity of his own situation, but also Remus was his would-be murderer, like I can understand why he is so defensive and so like willing to go to the extremes when dealing with Lupin. But at the end of the book, like not the end, but in the confrontation scene, in the movie we see that he's not actually attacking, like this is not his priority, like even with his big feelings, his trauma, he's still not extremely, he's not trying to kill him or trying to harm him or anyway, like his priority, he has his priorities right, I think.
Well, he also prioritized like capturing Sirius Black. And now I'm forgetting exactly how much emphasis that got in the movie, because that I think is also a factor. I agree that he thought Lupin was maybe a little reckless, but also Sirius Black is on the loose, and the two of them together are like key figures in that super traumatic incident in his formative years. So that also may have been a play in why he was doing everything he could without actually literally saying Lupin's a werewolf.
If werewolves were, canonically, they're known to be on the Voldemort side, so he was cautious that if Black, Potter's best friend, went indeed to the dark side, was to say Lupin, a werewolf, wasn't there anyway as well. So I think that's also what played into it. No one could believe Black went to the dark side until supposedly he confessed in a rage of madness. But then what did that mean for Lupin, who was a known werewolf? So I think Snape was the one that actually knew how many werewolves were on the dark side. And that there was a really possibility Loomis was swayed as much as his best friend, which is why he accuses him of letting Black into the castle. Because he was afraid Lupin went to the dark side as a werewolf, where Black was persuaded by, his dark family. And when we get to the scene where he's like, Black is there, it's not automatically, he could have done very easily a very fast Sectum Sempra and Black would have bled out. Like, there was nothing, he could have done that. And even if children were in the way, he could have healed them. And the other one, because he can do non-verbal magic, and Black would have bled to death, but he, at some level, he still is like, go on. He doesn't want to do the justice himself, even if he surely would enjoy it.
Yeah, justice is a good word for it, because the idea that he should be turning over Sirius Black to the Dementors for the kiss, like, he, with the information that he had, that would have been justice.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so with Alan's role in this, I think that there's just so much subtlety in his body language too. And this is Alan, like, putting his mark on it, where, as much as they made it different for the screen adaptation, you still can read so much in his subtle, like, body language cues, and it's amazing. So even though this movie gets lower ratings on many of the, like, individual metrics, I think it has a lot of key subtle details from Alan that still make it one of my favorites.
I'm curious if anybody said anything about the scene when Harry is sneaking around with the map and Snape and Lupin have their interaction.
Out for a walk in the moonlight, Lupin.
Yeah. Because, okay, I've said this before, but that moment has kid walking in on his, like, fighting or divorced parents energy.
Yeah, I don't see anything in the comments. There is one where, after Potter goes to Hogsmeade.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh.
Speaking of Potter sneaking around.
Mm-hmm. What was your head doing in Hogsmeade?
Right.
No part of your body should be allowed.
Right.
I think he's fully aware that Harry was using something like James used often to sneak out. It's maybe not very sure the invisibility cloak, but he's certain that Malfoy didn't hallucinate out of love of Harry, that he didn't just see his floating hat, that he knows Harry was there, but he can't prove it.
Oh yeah, multiple people did comment on that and how that one line is left out.
Yeah.
No part of your body is allowed in Hogsmeade. So lower ratings on sarcasm and sass, because that didn't make the cut. Alrighty, onward to Goblet of Fire.
Yes, Goblet of Fire.
The bad hair material. The backstory of how they all got stuck with that hair, it's like still hilarious to me to this day on. And I think the older adults really found it hilarious for the kids.
So I have to admit, I thought Goblet of Fire was the most forgettable of the movies. Like, ask me for my favorite scene from Goblet of Fire, and I'll just kind of shrug at you. Like, I'm not, like, the movie's biggest fans in the first place, honestly. Yeah. Like, they're fine adaptations for a book going to film, but I wasn't ever blown away by one of these. And I think Goblet of Fire in particular was like, what? That's forgettable. And the one moment that I really wanted was at the end in the book when Snape reveals his dark mark, and it's not there. And it looks like in these comments, a lot of people agree with me that that is a key moment that is missing.
Yeah. And it's like a big moment to not have too.
That was the moment that made me a Snape fan. Like that, I was reading Goblet of Fire. It was the summer of the year 2000, and I closed that back cover. I set that book down, and I immediately went online and was like, "What did Dumbledore send Snape to do after revealing the Dark Mark?" And I like just typed out an entire question into Ask Jeeves, and wound up at Snape tripod web rings. And that was like the day I became a Snape fan. So I was especially disappointed that that was not in the movie.
It's funny because the visual that stands out to me most from that movie is the deleted scene between him and Karkaroff, where they're having their like extremely homoerotic moment together.
And then finding those students. And that's like Liz ran through my head. But also I find that they should have really, regarding that scene that, you know, it was missed. It's also the fact that Sirius Black is introduced. You know, it's like, and Ron is like, "Calm down, mom." And, you know, Mrs. Vesey, and the fact that they have to shake hands. I would really like to see that scene portrayed, because it would show like the true animosity, and then like we learn later how much Snape really hated Sirius. And he still, at Dumbledore's orders, he went and shook that guy's hand, you know, to be like, "We're in this together now, we're on the same side." That was like the proof that he was on the light side, he was on their side. Despite everything, when Dumbledore told him, you know, "Go and shake hands, you're on the same side," he did it.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame.
Was that Goblet of Fire?
No, actually, wasn't that Order of the Phoenix?
No, I think the Goblet of Fire.
Oh, was it Goblet of Fire? Okay.
It was at the end of the. It was the end. It's like it was in the books, not in the movies, which is like what I'm sad about.
I think the movies are kind of especially slack about giving you impactful stuff happening at the end, because it's more focusing on Harry in a way that you're supposed to project onto him. So we're kind of not going to worry about this other stuff that's going on that's gearing up for the next book. We're kind of just going to like skimp on that. But I think, you know, this movie was maybe especially unfair to Snape in that, like, there was important stuff that we didn't get to see of him.
No, we just get to see him play whack-a-mole.
It wasn't the books either, but they would have loved a scene with him teaching the Slytherins how to dance, like McGonagall did with the Gryffindors. I don't think he would have actively, you know, be like, "Hand on my waist" or whatever. He'd be like, "You do this, you do that. 100 points from Slytherin if you don't do it right."
He would make other people demonstrate. he would pick out leading students and make them do it.
I'm sure purebloods ended up having dancing lessons somewhere in their upbringing.
Snape grew up in the 60s and 70s, and he's a half-blood. Maybe he taught them like disco moves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where's that fanfic? I need that right now.
Right?
I needed it yesterday.
And the purebloods were like, "What?"
One thing I do remember being like, okay, they did okay with that in this film adaptation, was trying to set up how Snape knew that something was going on with Polyjuice Potion.
Yeah.
So I remember being like in the book, like not really having that register with me. And maybe it's because I had already read the book and it was spoiled by the time I got to the movie, but I felt like I was following that particular story arc a lot better in the movie. So props to that. That's like the one thing I can think of that was memorable about Goblet of Fire, was Snape being like, "Yeah, my ingredients are missing. What are you doing with Polyjuice, Potter?" And that's all I got.
Yeah, and that was a good scene.
I think Moody was very fortunate that Snape had a more, you know, was suspecting Harry because of previous incidents, because say Harry was not a suspect, and that Snape had the full ability to go on a detective range, he could have discovered Crouch. So I think the fact that he really didn't like Harry played into Crouch's favor at that time.
Okay. The next film is Order of the Phoenix.
Yay. This one also had a lot of mixed reviews in
Mhm.
terms of like Snape scenes being left out, but it was highly rated on Alan's interpretation and a little bit of the sarcasm and sass.
Mhm.
So otherwise, yeah, it was pretty mixed. Oh man, the first comment was, "Good grief, this is the worst one," in all caps.
Did they elaborate on that, or?
Yes, even if he didn't get enough screen time in Half-Blood Prince, this one is still the worst. No
Mhm.
actual scenes with the Order or with his
Yeah,
back and forth
yeah.
with Sirius. Snape's
Yeah.
worst memory being cut to the bare minimum.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's so annoying.
yeah.
Huge shame.
Yeah. Oh, and this goes on. Like, good grief, this is the worst one. Keeps going. The fact that Harry just kind of randomly Uno reverses the legitimacy spell rather than making
Mhm.
the conscious choice to break his trust and dipping into the pensieve. So yeah, it robbed us of Snape's trauma response to that, which Rickman would have done flawlessly.
I also hated like they didn't include the whole memory of it because we only see like little bit of like teasing and everything. We don't see the actual sexual assault,
Yeah.
No.
and we don't see the Lily's reaction. I think that was the most important thing because in the memory in the book, Harry sees Lily in the crowd and watching and like holding back laughter, like he's actually enjoying the humiliation of Snape until she decides that it's enough, like probably she has a line. She draws the line at some point, but up until that point, Harry observes her to be like holding back laughter, enjoying the humiliation, enjoying the like show. And I think like it takes away from the nuance of Lily's and Snape relationship, like their
Yeah.
friendship, because like I cannot ever imagine holding back laughter if my friend or like even my enemy was like humiliated in this way.
Yeah.
So like I think it was like a little hint at Lily's character flaw, but we didn't see that in the movie and I hated it.
I was just thinking, like, it undermines this perfect image of Lily as this inhumanly perfect person, which so often happens with like dead mother characters. And you get to see her in real time being a bad friend and like kind of not being a great person, which, everybody as a teenager has these moments. So, it's not like I'm saying like, oh, I hate her or whatever. It's not like that. It's just that it makes her human by giving her this really cruel, awful moment.
Yeah.
I will go off on you saying I can say I hate her because so for me, I would have like even in high school when I had people, necessarily like that they didn't like me or whatever, I would have never betrayed like my friend. If my friend was could have called me names, whatever, I would still stand by their side. Maybe it's just because I'm a Hufflepuff, but and I think you all are Slytherins here. But for me, I could not imagine leaving my friend there. And I think it's a
Yeah.
sign that she was way over being friends with him before he realized. He blames himself for that, but at the end, he sees that as the moment of
Exactly.
breaking friendship and sees it's his fault. But at the same time, she was not doing anything. If that was my friend, I would probably be in Azkaban for murder. Like, there's like no
Yeah.
question that I would have like attacked them or something. But she does nothing, and she's a
Yeah.
prefect. Same with Remus, but Remus is their friend. Lily made conscious effort to distance themselves from him. It's like, you're just as bad, Potter. He's like trying to keep a line for herself.
I mean, I guess I should say, like, it's kind of like I have to separate my personal feelings where I do kind of hate her in that moment, right? From my like looking at this objectively as a narrative where it's like, okay, that makes sense. Because yeah, at that moment, I'm like, this is spawning the desire for me to kind of make her a villain sometimes when I'm writing her, right?
Mhm.
And that's fun, but I don't want to come off as bashing her because she's a fictional character and like, whatever. But my gut reaction was like, oh no. And it kind of gave me this headcanon because what you're saying is so true. She was already moving on before he said that. And it gives me this like headcanon that he knew that too. and he purposely sabotaged their friendship by doing what he did to get the pain over with quickly.
It's interesting. So I know we have talked about Snape's source of memory before on this pod, and maybe I want to step away from that for a second and talk about occlumency, because there are a number of comments in our survey about that. And I feel like that's such a missed opportunity because of how Alan's portrayal is so calm and collected. And there could have been a very clear line to the story where we connect his occlumency skills to that calm and collected demeanor.
Yeah.
It wasn't there.
I agree with that.
That could have been so much.
I love the scenes in the book where, with the legitimacy and occlumency, and it's disappointing to not really see the depth of that in the movies.
Though I do believe in the books, he winds up having one of his kind of rage out moments. So maybe that is how it didn't fit. And they couldn't figure out how to adapt that in a way that made it sensible for Alan's portrayal.
I think, it is such a trauma response, right? Like, I've never seen such a wonderful portrayal of somebody being triggered and it being so raw and acknowledging that how that can look like rage, outside of the person. And at once I'm like, oh, I wish that were in the movie. And at the same time, oh, I worry that if it had been in the movie, it would have just been him being angry and missed some of that underlying trauma response.
Right.
So then the last note I have about this film is obviously, because, obviously.
Yeah, that is delicious.
In a film where clearly people have mixed feelings at best, that one stands out as a voice moment where Alan just nailed it. And we all hate Umbridge, right?
Yeah.
No matter what side of the Snape fandom you stand on, Umbridge stands as a... Yeah.
I want to meet an Umbridge fan. I want to meet them and observe them.
Under a microscope, yeah.
But also the scene he offers his sympathies to Umbridge if she wants to kill Harry is pure gold.
Yeah.
You have my deepest sympathies if you met. He's and this is a moment that doesn't get, it's just a moment that doesn't really get much shine upon. He's oh, he didn't alert the order fast enough, or he didn't, do that. But people don't realize he actively stopped Harry from being questioned and revealing all the secrets by saying there's no Veritaserum left. And Umbridge, because she, while in power, she's also a bit dumb and doesn't, if she was someone that has a higher IQ function, she could have been okay, let's see what, let's show me your potions, or, let's go now and see, the new one. Maybe I want to poison him and, they will be slightly different. But she was sure, I trust you.
So I know this is a Rickmania episode, but I'd like to put a huge shout out for Imelda Staunton, who played Umbridge. She did so well. Yeah. I am so impressed by her portrayal.
And I've seen her in other movies, and she has a totally different vibe. A great acting.
And she's in The Crown, right? She plays the queen for one of the arcs of The Crown, and
the last season.
So good. Yeah.
I remember my biggest memory of her is in the movie Pride, which is a fantastic movie. It's one of my favorite movies, and she's discovers a sex toy, and it's hilarious because the whole time I'm thinking oh my god, this is Umbridge.
That's what I'm thinking. Is I watched Sense and Sensibility years later, and I was that's Umbridge making up with House, and it was so
yes. Oh yeah, Imelda Staunton and Hugh Laurie in that movie, and that's another Alan Rickman movie. So for those listening, if you haven't seen Sense and Sensibility, you need to do that.
Yes, Colonel Brandon.
Oh man, he's a treat in that one, and every actor is at their peak in that movie. It is so good.
Plus, it's Jane Austen, so I'm
yes, yes. Yeah, and Emma Thompson and Ang Lee, the director, wrote a lot of the script and the adaptation for it, and they did a very good job. And there's some also great interviews too.
Didn't they win an Oscar for it?
Yeah, I think there were some awards. Okay, those are all the notes I have on Order of the Phoenix. Anyone else have a good moment? Or
I think this is the movie I've watched the least.
Some people are like, I'm so mad at this movie from the comments. And that's the way I kind of felt about it too. It's like,
Really cheated out of some good snack moments.
yeah.
yes.
I watched this movie first when I wasn't really deep into fandom. Like I wasn't in fandom at all when I watched the movie. But for me, and many people may not like me for saying this, but to me the best thing about that movie was the fact that the ending, like it was like when Sirius died, that was like the best part for me. But his death was so it's like also his death was like so anticlimactic. Like he was
Yeah.
like he was like a good minute in that veil before he went up and died. He was like standing staring there and he was like, what now? And that scene was hilarious. I mean, for me, it's like, okay, interesting that. But I didn't really care much. I was just like, because I don't like bullies. So for me, it was like, okay, he's there now.
Well, I think the way they have it in the movie definitely takes some of the emotional impact away, because especially if you hadn't read the books, right? You're like, wait, what? He's dead? What?
Yeah.
Exactly. He's like, where is he going? It's like he's like flying away.
Yeah.
Because he's sitting there for like a good minute, and then Harry's staring at him, and then they're like, no one does anything.
Right.
I know that Snape is not in that scene, so of course he's not in the movie to talk about, but I do wonder sometimes what his thoughts were back at Hogwarts. Did he feel left behind for that battle at the Ministry? Did he have other things he really needed to do? Like, what was his mission while everyone else was fighting?
Yeah.
But where would he be? You know, like in which side? Like he couldn't like openly fight
Right.
with the Order. There was no possibility for him to fight with the Death Eaters. I think like he was pretty like glad that he was left behind, because whichever direction he went, it wouldn't end up well for him, especially since Fudge and the other Ministry workers showed up at the last second and saw Voldemort. So like things got like really, really serious and out of the open, and like Snape couldn't be seen in any side, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
I like what you're saying, Irem, is that's a very good point that he probably really liked being behind. Personally, though, I like the fan fictions where he's like having to fight on the Death Eater side and like saves one or another when he sees them in battle and put them in a really bad position. But I think what you're saying about him being happy being at Hogwarts is actually the reality. Steve was just like chilling. He's been double-siding all year, and he's finally like, like in this battle, he's like not there. He doesn't have to be there. Like Voldemort doesn't want him there. Dumbledore doesn't want him there. So he's like, I can relax.
He's gonna have a day off.
Obviously he's not relaxing, but he's, it's something that probably made him happier. He didn't have to fight for his life yet.
Yeah. There's one more thing I noticed watching this. There's been complaints, and I agree with them, that they make all the Death Eaters able to fly.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I hated that.
Just terrible, terrible decision.
Yeah. But in this case, the Order also flies in.
Yeah.
That was even worse, I
They're
think.
like with white smoke rather than black.
Yeah.
And that's again, like, I can understand why they do that for a movie adaptation, because you don't have Harry's like internal narrative telling you who is who and what to feel about it, and you need those visual cues. But it is a little like, I don't know, obvious, almost insulting to the to the viewer. So I get why they did it, and I don't know.
Imagine if they kept Harry's monologue. I think a lot of fans would have seen that Harry is a bit of an idiot.
And oblivious.
Because like in the movies, you miss that. You miss Harry's, being an idiot. But if they kept the monologue, it would be like people not seeing. Like I really want to know Harry's thought process of getting that, that why he does the thing he does. clearly some connection is not touching in his brain.
That actually reminds me of one of the things I dislike the most about the movies, and this is not specifically Snape related, but in the books, Harry is a little oblivious, and the reason for that is that you're being introduced to this world via Harry. So he kind of has to be dumb so that he can have stuff explained to him, because he's like an author stand-in. So he has to be a little less intelligent than the reader for that reason. Like, that's a common like literary thing. But in the movies, they don't do that, and they make the bizarre choice, especially in the earlier movies, of making Ron kind of an idiot to the point where Hermione is explaining the wizarding world to him sometimes. And
And that makes no sense.
that makes no sense,
Yeah.
and it makes Hermione less likable as a character, which does her
Right.
dirty, because she sounds like a know-it-all or whatever, to the point of it's kind of weird, but
Yeah.
and it does Ron dirty, because like, why doesn't he know this?
Yeah, they apparently gave a lot of his lines to her.
To Hermione, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And yeah, played him for comic relief.
Right. It's a shame.
And then they get to have a lover's tiff in the next movie.
Yep.
If we're ready to talk about Half-Blood Prince, oh my
I
gosh.
think you're ready. Yeah.
I mean, I'm always ready to talk about the Half-Blood Prince.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is where they whitewash Lavender too.
Yes. Okay, so
Half-Blood Prince.
Half-Blood Prince. The ratings went up a little better on this one.
Yeah. No surprise there.
Yeah, especially Alan Rickman's portrayal and his sexiness and thirst factor are back up again.
Mhm.
Which, yeah, several comments here. Let's see. Oh, there's a sad comment about how he's obviously aging. And this has been one of the beefs with the casting in the Potter movies overall, is
Mhm.
that Marauders are all aged up significantly because of Alan Rickman's age.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And that was actually one of my problems with it specifically. Like, as much as I love Alan Rickman, I had mixed reviews about
Yeah.
or mixed feelings about it, him being cast in that role. Because I
Right.
remember hearing about it in like the year 2000, like at the end of the year 2000 or the beginning of 01, because the first movie came out in 01
Mhm.
around November of 01. And I vividly remember being like, Alan Rickman, really? I mean,
same.
I love him, but
I mean, not same,
do,
but you know.
do the books
Yeah.
at his age,
Yeah.
like before it was revealed? Because I
Oh,
don't remember seeing anything that indicates that like he was in his 30s.
Well, I think you could have worked backwards, because it does acknowledge that he was the same age as Harry's parents.
and
Yes.
that they died so young.
Right. So I
Yeah.
think you could have figured it out, but I don't think it explicitly says so in like the first
Because
book.
I don't remember Harry's parents' age mentioned either. Like we know the dates they died, but did we know their birth dates?
That's a good question. I feel like
Yeah.
we had kind of worked it
Mm.
out. I remember in the 3-year summer between books 4 and book 5, like the fanfics all seemed to know
Yeah.
that they were in their 30s in the
Mhm.
for Prisoner of Azkaban specifically. Like I said, one of the very first fanfics I read took place during Prisoner of Azkaban, and yeah, I know that established in my mind their ages.
Yeah.
I think it's difficult when it comes to casting, because like they wanted to cast like a well-known, like established actor. And I think even when you see like fan casts for Snape in like a hypothetical like new movie, people are always mentioning dudes who are literally older than Snape ever lived to be. And the problem is that like most established actors are older. And the one cast that I thought, oh, well, that would actually like work age wise was like somebody mentioned the kid from Stranger Things.
Oh,
I think people are really hesitant to actually cast him his age, but they would really have to find a rather young person who is probably in their 20s to cast him like now. And my mental solution to that is always like, we'll make it 2D animation, and then you just have to cast a voice actor.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the most popular fan cast for Snape is Adam Driver.
And he is now older than Snape ever lived to be.
He is now, but like I think he is like 38, 39. I think he could pull it off with the age thing. But the problem is when people like suggest him, like when people say that he should play the Snape, they're always like, yeah, he should play young Snape. Like
Right, exactly.
they're still thinking him like a really old guy, like in his 50s or 60s. I think it's the image Alan Rickman created. As much as I love him
Right.
so much, I think the age thing, like the age is one thing that still bothers me.
People are like, oh, this guy could play young Snape, and it's like a guy who's 45, and it's like,
No, he could
No?
really not play young Snape. Because Snape was theoretically almost young. I'd like to think about Alan's portrayal and really, I know it's like a lot of symbolic that James and Lily look aged because of the war, but at the same time, I like to think the same about Alan Snape. Like, we see him as like how he was inside, a very aged, very wary young man that
like a
lived
projection.
a lot.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
like it's like his inner projection soul. But at the same time, the trend of casting older actors for young roles is like really is something that's even worse now, I feel like. There's a lot
Yeah.
of high schoolers are like in their mid-20s in the movies.
Right.
The most recently is like Doctor Who, the casting of Donna's daughter. She's supposedly 15, but that actress can barely, it's like, there's no way. Like, you look at her, doesn't look like a teenager. She's like clearly over 20.
Well, to be fair, this has always been a problem in television.
Yeah, it has been.
And in movies, I think it's becoming more of a problem because we actually have better protections now for underage actors.
Right. I was thinking that.
So I try to think of that as a good thing in the film industry, though. And I think you mentioned that the war and taking its toll, and the older I get, the more I just go ahead and buy that as a reason for the aging up of the character.
I'm the opposite. The older I get, the less believable I find that.
Yeah, interesting.
Because like I see like one of my best friends is like about to turn 40, and to me she looks 25, and I'm like, and she's had a really traumatic life and like a lot of hardships, and I'm like, yeah, that doesn't actually. And Snape never really goes outside during the daytime. I feel like he would be like have dewy, beautiful skin and just look so young.
I will also point out that teaching is a very stressful job.
Oh yeah,
especially
Yeah.
if you hate it.
Oh,
and I did. I hated it too. But I do look younger than I am.
I would say teaching has aged me terribly.
It ages me inside when I was doing it, but not outside.
So I think that's the saying is the reflection of the inside that's age.
Right.
Not the outside.
But this is why I'm a huge proponent of like do more animation. Like it's magic. There's magic going on. You'd be able to do so much more and make it look so much more visually impressive. And like you could design the characters to like, you could do book description or you could do something different, but you have a lot more control over it. And you can cast any voice actor that fits the role regardless of their age.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about some scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does the movie open with the unbreakable vow scene, or is there something else first? I can't remember.
Cokeworth comes up at 14 minutes and 55 seconds.
14 minutes in. Yeah. Okay.
And yes, I love it.
Looks like mixed reviews on the vow scene, actually. I'm a big fan, just in general, of the whole concept of the unbreakable vow as a thing in this magical universe. And the fact that Severus is bound by one, or probably more, that's never actually clarified. But I think it's kind of a big fan theory that he may also be under an unbreakable vow for Dumbledore's mission in general. But yeah, the idea that you could die if you don't follow through on a solemn promise is a huge thematic kind of, it represents so much of what Severus is about.
And it's the fact that we don't know his arrangement with Dumbledore yet. Like we see
Yeah.
the scene and we're like, what? It's like he's actually in the end what he's gonna do because he's made to do it. But then we learned that Dumbledore already knew and he was like forcing his hand. And he manages very creatively to avoid Bellatrix's suspicion while doing what Dumbledore wants, really. And I wonder how would he have navigated that scene had Dumbledore not wanted to die. You know, be like, you know, you can kill me, it's fine. It's really traumatic. It's like, I don't think, you know, it's like, I think Alan did quite a good job, but at the same time, we don't really see how traumatic that year must have been for him. Like, he's
Right.
supposed to finally
agree.
be teaching the subject he wanted to teach, which, mind you, we don't see him do that. We don't see him do anything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And we also, like, he doesn't figure out how Harry is cheating basically with himself. Like, Harry is so good at potions because Snape is theoretically teaching him. But he's like that year, like knowing at some point you gotta kill the only person who knows you're on their side. Like, that must have been a really terrible year for him.
Yeah. I will say, like, sorry to jump back, but you mentioned Spinner's End appears, Cokeworth appears 14 minutes in. And, like, you know, even though this isn't specifically about Alan Rickman's performance, it's specific to the movies. And it's one of the settings that I like more, you know, like when you think of all the settings in Harry Potter, the way that Cokeworth is in the movies is one of my favorites because it actually makes a lot of sense and it builds Snape's character so much. And I kind of, in my head, I kind of compare it to my disappointment with the way Malfoy Manor is portrayed, because I think they prioritized, like, oh, this is where bad things happen over the Malfoy's opulence.
True.
You know, I kind of was disappointed with that, but like on the other end of that, I was extremely delighted with Snape's house because it's like this actually reflects his background quite well and gives us a lot of visual information in an instant, which I really like. So that was one of my favorite parts about this movie.
I really like how they portrayed the neighborhood he was living, because in his memories, in the movies, the scenes are like extremely bright. They're in a green area, like, you know, when they're like children, Snape and Lily. And like, it doesn't give the vibe that it's a poor town, it's a poor part of the city. So like, it gives a totally different vibe, and it doesn't show or like reflect Snape's background. We're not sure about if Lily was like really poor or she was whether she was better off. But still, we know that Snape was poor. Snape had lots of problems in the house with his father, and we know that it was a darker vibe. But we don't see that in the movies with his memories. But I loved how they portrayed the whole neighborhood, like his house and the Half-Blood Prince. Like, it was a really accurate description, in my opinion, and it added to his background and what kind of upbringing he had.
I'd like to mention the dynamic between Narcissa, Bellatrix, and Snape in that scene, where Narcissa is really falling apart in the book. Not in here so much.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah.
They say that that's one of the most physical contact between adults in the whole series.
Yeah.
Certainly with Snape. Yeah. Like, she grasps him, like she's begging and yeah. So,
but not so much here.
Yeah, when your child is in mortal danger,
right.
I do expect some, a little bit of emotion there. So they really played her up as more aloof in this movie, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. And when you compare it to Cedric Diggory's father, finding out like that intense emotional reaction, and not give Narcissa, like, you know, not that reaction because obviously Draco hasn't died, but the anticipation of that reaction that her son could come to great tragedy. Yeah, I would have liked to see that too, actually.
You know, I never connected that before, that maybe that undermines her role in the final film when she betrays Voldemort. Yeah, I hadn't quite connected it that way, but I
was gonna say that because, like, that gives a hint that she was gonna betray the Dark Lord for the sake of Draco. She was gonna do it, and somehow in the last movie that comes a bit half of nowhere if you don't realize how much she was into protecting Draco.
Yeah,
But also, I like the scene in the book because before this point, we see Narcissa very little. And when we see her, like, she's always like really cold, like maybe aloof. Also, like, she's looking down on people and like she's this perfect picture of a pure blood woman. But this scene actually humanized her
Yeah.
in a way that like reader could relate to her. But in the movies, she's again like you can see she's worried, but still not as much as it should be. Movies are like a little bit dehumanizing her in that moment because seeing a very collected person like having a meltdown, having a worried moment would be better for her character.
I agree. And it kind of gave me a thought just now because we were talking about how much Snape is so much more collected in the movies. I think, they're really giving us the impression that, like, oh, it's a social thing that Slytherins are very good at suppressing their emotions. I think the book shows us that they do have those emotions to suppress because we see them in these private moments. And the movie is like, no, they're so good at it. The mask never slips.
And actually, in the books, Snape is not good at like suppressing his emotions like at
Yes,
all.
that's very true.
Mhm.
He has like outbursts. You can see. I was thinking in the books, you can see him being happy, being gleeful,
Mhm,
being smug, like
mhm.
being angry. I mean, like we have like there are lots of moments he's like really outraged. He has a moment of like being unhinged at the end of the Prisoner of Azkaban. Like in the movies, he's like in the books, he's more human with more
Yeah.
human emotions, and like Harry is actually able to read his emotions because he makes like observations like Snape looks like he could kill someone, like he looks
Mhm.
like someone cancel
Cancel
Christmas, you know.
Christmas, yes.
Yeah, like Harry the oblivious boy is able to read him,
Yeah.
you know, like he's not that good at suppressing his emotions.
Yep.
Exactly.
Which that connects to this movie as well. At the end, do we not get the line where Harry calls him a coward? Because that's Harry reading Snape and pushing his button.
Right.
And
Exactly.
and that is a
I don't
moment.
think
Yeah.
we do.
Yeah, that's a moment
Um,
that I don't think we have.
Do you want me to play it real quick?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
the flight of the prince scene.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, let me share screen here.
I also think the movies went a bit on like adults can't really have outbursts like that
Mm-hmm.
because we don't see like there's like also Hagrid being drunk and crying and so
Right.
on. We don't
Right.
really see that in the movies.
The one
We don't
exception is
actually a
Dumbledore
fight.
in Goblet of Fire. For no reason.
One person who was like collected in books is like,
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
And he does get some maximum billow in this too.
Yeah. Oh gosh, this scene is over 8 minutes long. Nice. Yeah.
you can see how Bellatrix is kind of crazy because like what's the point of walking on the table and before doing this? Like you can do this out from the floor. You don't need to.
Drama. Dominance. Like, as a show of dominance, I could see it.
Slytherins are really into catwalks.
Fight back! You coward, fight back!
Oh, he did say coward. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
He belongs
Yeah.
to the Dark Lord.
But Snape didn't, like, respond the way I recall.
didn't
Like,
respond,
Retort.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Like, don't call me a coward, but at the same time, I wonder, I know Harry was, beaten with grief, but why in the name did he think? Snape killed Dumbledore, defeated the bad side. Why in the name didn't he disarm me and take me to the Dark Lord? He could have easily done that, so like, Harry's on the ground.
Mhm.
Right.
You dare use my own spells against me, Potter? Yes. I'm the half-blood prince.
Dun dun dun.
So
Oh.
a bit different from
Yeah, little different.
I think that might be a good spot to stop that clip. So
I think so.
yeah. So we answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that was yeah.
Oh yeah, and getting
Movies
attacked by
there.
Buckbeak. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just noticed that.
Can I say I found this scene very anticlimactic,
Yes.
Yeah.
especially
Mhm.
compared to the books, because in the books there's actually like fight going around, like they're not
Mhm.
just like walking
Mhm.
and like running away. We also see Carols in the books,
Mm-hmm.
like the
Mhm.
first
Mhm.
glimpse of Carols, like they're trying to fight Ginny and stuff, and Harry is obsessively going after Snape, and we also see Snape is trying to protect Draco in a way, like make him go and make him move faster. But also, there's an actual fight. There are like multiple spells between Snape and Harry. Harry tries to cast Crucio twice.
Mhm.
So like this is a like very good full blown fight scene in normal like in the books, but this scene in the movie is really disappointing in my opinion,
Yeah.
Mhm.
because it also doesn't reflect the emotional side of it. And Harry looks so weak
Yeah.
and like so defeated, but in the book, in the scene, like he has fire. Like
Right. Right.
he's
Yeah.
Right.
obsessed.
Yeah.
He's going after him like the same way he went after Bellatrix at the end of the Order of the Phoenix. He's a man on a mission. But this in this scene, he's so weak. He doesn't do anything. He doesn't even try to cast a spell, only Sectum Sepra. But like that was really disappointing for me.
Yeah. And then Alan's response in his portrayal of Snape is very annoyed more than
Mm-hmm.
Afraid.
the flight. Like that scene is called The Flight of the Prince, and he doesn't have any urgency to it.
Right.
Right.
Like,
Mhm.
In the book, when he flies out the window, I was like, oh man, that is how I want to quit my job.
Yeah. For sure.
that's something.
But also, there was one detail that they missed. When Harry tries to cast spells after spell, Snape still tries to teach him in that moment.
Right.
Yes.
Like, he tells him, you're still sharding your spells, you're still not occluding your mind. Like, in this impossible moment, he's still trying to make him understand
Right.
things. Like, he's
Mhm.
still trying to help him. Yeah, no.
It should be obvious to Harry that he's still on his side, you know? It's almost like he's trying to tell him that.
Yeah, I felt that too.
It should be obvious for the fact that who in the name says like he's for the Dark so we'll just leave him here instead of taking him
Right.
to the freaking
Yeah.
Dark side.
Mhm.
It's like so
Yeah.
obvious, but Harry is like, blinded with grief. Also, I don't like the trend of making Harry a magical person that can suddenly cast nonverbal spells. Like Harry starts being like this master nonverbal spells when he was never that. Even at the end of the book, he's not good at nonverbal. But we have him in the movies casting nonverbal spell after nonverbal spell. Everyone does. Everyone is suddenly good at it.
Everybody, I was going to say, everybody does, yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to say about this movie is that there's a lot of stuff in it that is really hard to adapt to the screen
Yeah.
because so much of it centers around that potions book, for example. And technically there's a lot of Snape content in this movie if you know that he is the Half-Blood Prince from the start.
Mhm.
Right.
But if you don't know that, then you don't feel like there's as much Snape until this reveal
Maybe don't pick up that much.
at the end. Yeah. So that's an interesting thing because I'm looking through the comments on this survey and thinking nobody's really saying much about specific scenes. There's the scenes that are missing, and then there's some stuff about the vow scene, but not much else. I mean,
Mhm.
it's hard to adapt that stuff to the screen, and there's also like a lot of Snape content that's not Alan Rickman on the screen.
Right. I will say I was slightly disappointed that Harry was too normal about his obsession with that book.
Yeah.
I would have liked him to be less normal about it.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see a sort of, it's something they could have adapted. The scene where Hagrid overhears them. That could have been a sort of a nice touch to add
Mhm.
in it, but or like Hagrid, that scene where he sees them, but it's not there.
Yeah.
Right. Oh.
Okay.
So many missed opportunities.
Mm. So that sounds like a good place to go on to the Deathly Hallows.
Yes.
Part 1.
Part 1 has not much Snape because
Yeah.
the source material doesn't either.
Right.
So yeah, it's that opening scene with in the Malfoy Manor, right? Where he actually has quite an entrance, right? Like he comes
Yeah.
billowing into Malfoy Manor and then has to watch
Call back to the earlier.
Yeah, then has to watch Charity Burbage die,
Right.
right? Yeah, so that was a great scene. I think that was fine and good.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the movie had no Snape. So and understandably so, because the source material didn't.
Right.
So this one might be pretty short.
I think he made the most of his time on the screen, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then later you can assume that he's back at Hogwarts doing stuff, but that's, obviously not on screen.
They don't.
Because Harry is not there. Obviously, we're following Harry.
Right.
It's not Severus Snape and the Deathly Hallows. It probably Severus Snape and the year I tried to protect a bunch of dunderheads who were all out to kill themselves and me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. I'm sorry. Can we go back to Half-Blood Prince just for one?
Sure.
The deleted scene, it's called Snapedom. It's very short, but yeah, it's very impactful, I think.
Oh.
Go to your houses. No dawdling.
Ooh, look at that fog rolling in. What a vibe. And then he's
Watch
standing
this.
there. Ooh.
He's like reflecting what he has to do.
Oh yeah. He's putting on some mental armor.
Oh man, I wish this scene had been in the movie.
Right?
I think it would have revealed too much.
That's why they removed it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I'm glad we have access to it.
I mean, he shows so much anguish there.
Yeah.
Alan's eyes are like really expressive. Like it gives it away.
I like the shadow moving around his face too.
Yeah, that was a gorgeous shot.
Yeah, it's such a nice reflection of the events.
Yeah, so that was 1:40 seconds of pure magic right there. That was great.
Yeah, it's too bad. But really, I think it revealed too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I understand why they took it out, but I'm so glad that we can see it.
Yes. Yeah, it's just beautiful. So I'm sorry to
Okay.
yeah, I just remembered
worth
that.
it.
We
yeah.
had that one. So
And make sure that link gets highlighted in the show notes so our listeners can get a good look at it.
oh, I will. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, worth going back for. And then I think we
Yeah.
kind of covered part 1 of Deathly Hallows. So should we just onward to part 2?
Yeah, one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
As he walks in and he sees Charity Burbage,
Yes.
you see his eyes just widen just for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's just shuts down to his mask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And for that little scene in both the book and the movie, then the fandom has kind of taken that and run with it. And what is the relationship between Snape and Burbage and the way
Right.
she begs and is like, I thought we were friends. Yeah. So there's a lot of like, there again, so much potential there. And this world is so huge and sprawling and has such a giant cast of characters that it's still such a wonderful fandom to be a part of and try to imagine what else could be there.
I mean, I think, when you're a teacher, a lot of, like your co-workers, like I thought we were friends, that like at least I thought, you would like help me or like know each other. Because I see, even at work, there's like some people who have the mentality that if you work together, you're automatically friends. So it might have been that, it might have been they actually were friends, were like on friendly terms. Might have been just that, oh, we're co-workers, we know each other for so many years, surely we're friends. maybe either.
I can imagine them bonding over their Muggle backgrounds, though.
Yeah.
I would say that as an educator, again, the staff room is a really interesting place, full of almost as much drama as the school itself, and
Sometimes more.
and sometimes more.
Sometimes more.
Yes. So it's possible that they were very close friends. It's possible that they were just, keep work at work, or I think she wouldn't have said that if they were on the like catty side of the drama. Although we know Snape can be a catty bitch sometimes, and we love him for it. I think
she was almost gonna die. I think she was like, it could have been one last desperate attempt.
Isn't there like reference to them hanging out in the books a little bit? Like, so, I can't remember like where, but like a line about like, well, Snape doesn't really talk to people. He talks to Charity sometimes.
No.
Maybe maybe that could, like, it blurs together with fandom, you know?
I don't think this doesn't sound like something Harry would notice, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, that's true.
Can you imagine Harry actually paying attention to other people's lives? Except he only does it when he wants to gossip. And like it's when it's important to him. Otherwise, he probably would have realized that Sprout and Flitwick were together.
Well, there's also something to be said for students often don't look at their teachers as people.
Right, that's true.
And see them as sort of a monolith of the classroom. And that's just how the brain is at that time in their lives. And that's fine. That's perfectly normal.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just laughing because you're a teacher. You're like, that's fine. My heart is fine. Yeah, again, like for me, the teachers were like my best friend.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was a student, it was more like that. But having been on the other side of the desk, it's definitely a totally different experience. And yeah, everybody looks at their teachers a different way. And quite a lot of students don't, like, they have a pretty good disconnect between school and life, where school teachers are in a neat little box of that's my teacher. Yeah. So perfectly normal. But you just kind of don't account for the fact that they have a life outside of the classroom.
Yeah. I don't know. It opens up with the astronomy tower, and Snape is just out there looking over, and you see the Dementors and you hear the students marching. And it's like, of course, hindsight or whatever, when you see him, it's like, oh my gosh, poor guy.
Yeah.
But I wonder what people who have only watched the movies think of that.
Yeah, I've met plenty of people who watch the movies only and are also not in fandom, and I do notice that they have a totally different, perception of who Snape is as a character. And it's interesting because I get the impression that they do think of him as more irredeemable.
Right. Yeah.
Although I would say that Alan's acting kind of gives you a lot more emotion in the subtle nuance. So if you're inclined to pay attention to his body language,
right,
then that also gives you an entirely different view of it. So if all you take is the surface of like what he says, then he doesn't feel like as believable of a good guy in the end, or a red herring kind of character the way that I, for example, see him.
Right.
But yeah, when you start looking at Alan's acting in particular, and you really focus on his facial expressions and his body language, I think you see more of his internal conflict come through. And it's his greatness as an actor. And that was when I was finally like, okay, they may have made the right choice casting him. It wasn't just this last movie, that I don't think anyone else could have done it quite the same way. Yeah, although there are some notes here in our survey responses about how he's not nearly desperate enough, like at the end. And like the prince's tail also has some issues.
Yes.
There's some dialogue that's changed that I was disappointed with. And like, again, I can understand why people are saying like, oh, he wasn't as desperate enough. But again, that's where I point out like, okay, I feel like these are two different characters, and movie Snape has not been building to a desperate and, kicking and screaming ending of his life the way book Snape was.
Right.
Yeah, because he did scream in the book.
Right, he
And we
screamed.
didn't get that. He screamed.
Yes.
I would have liked to hear Alan do that, but
that's not the
I also
character.
understand why. Yeah, exactly.
You think he would have at least grunted when the snake was striking him.
Perfectly
It's just-
dignified to the end.
Yeah.
In the books, in the movies, he looks a bit more done with life. It's like this is the end.
And I think that's part of where like the age plays in, because you can imagine like somebody Alan Rickman's age thinking like, well, I've had my life, versus a 38-year-old.
Yeah.
A 38-year-old who never did get a chance at life. I mean, you can imagine, like, for argument's sake, let's say that Snape was like in his 50s or so. There's a much bigger gap between when he was in Hogwarts as a student and when he was as a teacher. So maybe he had a little life there. Like maybe he was able to go out in the world and everything, versus graduate, have a few years with the Death Eaters, and then immediately start working there. He's never lived.
No.
I think the book Snape also has that finality that he has not told Harry that he has to die.
Yeah.
The mission's not done. So that's where it kind of falls apart for me, is like there should be a little desperation there, because the mission's not done.
Right.
Like Harry doesn't know what he needs yet. Voldemort's not dead yet. Yeah.
Unless you can argue that Snape realized Harry was there and he was like, I need to keep quiet so for Darlow to leave faster.
Another thing that really irritates me is the way his memories came out as just these years.
Oh God.
When they could have looked like memories, they could have done so much with CGI or whatever and made them look much more dramatic.
I agree. And my biggest disappointment with that scene was that they changed Snape's dialogue to Harry. It's kind of it makes it like really on the nose and takes away some of the nuance of the scene of him just saying, look at me, and the many, many things that could mean.
Yes.
And, I think that it was kind of a choice of the movies to make like his feelings like explicitly romantic, versus in the book they're not. Like it's ambiguous,
right?
And it makes it less about the way things between them have changed throughout the years. There's been this animosity, and then Harry believed that he was a traitor, and now he's finding out that he's not. So there's this element of look at me, that he wants to be recognized for all of that, versus, oh, you have her eyes or whatever. It's like, it's such a disappointment to me, I guess.
Yeah, me too.
I also am like, they moved it to the boathouse, and in the book it was the Shrieking Shack, and I'm like, there's so much beautiful meaning in that setting, and that is a place of trauma for him that he is coming back to and dying there. So I'm okay with his performance. Like, it's just, and this has nothing to do with Alan exactly, but the choice of that setting really bothered me.
Was there really a reason for the change? Like, I really don't understand why they changed it to the boathouse. Like, I don't see any additional difficulties with making it in Shrieking Shack, but I mean, I'm not a movie maker, so I'm not sure. But it doesn't also add anything to the plot either. Like, it seems so unnecessary.
According to the art director, the setting was changed to give the scene a more dramatic atmosphere and take it out of an interior that was already known by viewers. And this art director says...
That's a weird choice.
Yeah, the art director says that Rowling approved this, so...
It's so poetic that it's in the Shrieking Shack, and I think that even adds more weight to look at me, because it's like, Snape's in this place where he was traumatized, and now he's literally dying, and maybe there's this part of him that's like, I don't want to be alone in this moment.
There's a symmetry to it.
Yeah.
The only thing that, and I like the symmetry, but why would Voldemort be, overlooking the battle from Hogsmeade rather than someplace on the grounds of Hogwarts?
Good question.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought the reasoning was.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, it does. It makes more sense than like I just didn't want to show the same setting again.
Yeah.
Right.
Maybe it was more like Warner Brothers didn't want to have to rebuild it.
Yeah,
I believe
true.
that. I believe that.
That wouldn't surprise
Yeah.
me one bit, but I am just speculating, you know.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, so that's that scene. And then we actually see the prince's tale after that scene. And
Mhm.
man, there's a lot of
Mhm.
comments in here about the disappointment with how the prince's tale was handled,
Yes.
which I've always kind of approached the prince's tale as I don't believe for one second that it wasn't like crafted and curated specifically to get Harry to do what he needed to do. Like Snape is a master of mind magic, and
Yeah.
so that makes all of it sus.
Very agreed.
So I'm not too fussed about anything they wanted to do to it for the movie adaptation. I didn't need like a line by line rehash of it, but I do think it didn't make as much sense as it should have. Like it was almost a little rushed maybe, and
Mhm.
I don't think
it
if
was
you,
rushed.
yeah, I think if you didn't know what you were looking at, you couldn't follow it.
Mhm.
I think it gives a like different perspective into Snape and Lily's relationship, like friendship, when you only watch the movie, because the memories they selected, they're talking about Hogwarts and stuff in the beginning, like they're meeting at first, and then they're talking about Hogwarts, then they're going to Hogwarts, there is sorting, and there is James being a jerk by pushing their books, and then immediately it's James and Lily dancing. Like there is literally nothing in between.
Yeah.
And when you look at it from this perspective, you see like, okay, Snape was a bitter lover who wanted Lily but couldn't have it, and
Right.
instead this like jerk got Lily. But like I don't think if you read the books carefully, you can interpret that like Snape might not be in love with Lily
Exactly.
romantically. You know, like
Exactly.
it doesn't necessarily point to the romantic love. For me, I always felt that it was more like friendship. Like she was the first person who accepted him, who treated him well as
Yeah.
a peer. And like she was by his side for a while. So like he latched onto it and he was grateful for her friendship.
Yeah.
And when she died indirectly because of him, like he felt guilty. Like I think
Right.
that makes sense. And
Exactly.
it doesn't have to be like romantic. It can be romantic. It doesn't have to be. So like
Exactly.
when you watch the memories in the movie, it paints a completely different picture, and I really hated it.
That's why when I was saying like, oh, I've met people who've only watched the movies, I think that's where a lot of the incel stuff comes from
Yes,
that people say
exactly.
about Snape. And I think it really undermines, because the thing about the book is like, you very well could read it as romantic. You could just as easily read it as completely platonic. But I
Right.
think by not focusing on the possibility of a romantic feeling behind it, it really highlights the devastation of losing his friend, you know, and we just don't get that in the movies the same way.
Mhm.
Exactly. But I didn't like the addition where Snape stepped over James's body.
Oh yeah, and people
Like
cite that
was-
like it's in the
yeah.
Oh,
books, and it's
man.
not.
like that was so unnecessary, but it also doesn't make sense why
Mhm.
he's there.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
not there at all.
Like why he's there and like why he's there before anyone else.
Right.
Mhm.
That's the most I don't know, like it didn't make sense to me.
Because like if he was that close, he would have stopped the download.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So it's illogical that he shows up right before and he's not caught by Sirius or anything. It's like Sirius, Hagrid get there quite fast. And he's, mourning Lily. He's like, but how did he get him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is another thing where
Yeah.
it's hard to adapt to the screen, and they just didn't pull it off.
Like, how are we going to show him grieving? Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that could have been done better. And I get that they were in a tough spot trying to make that adaptation work, but yeah, the disappointment we all have in it kind of illustrates
Yeah.
how effective that was.
And everybody's like, oh, well, he was holding Lily's dead body while the baby was crying.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's like, what did you want him to do with the baby? Like,
Mhm.
the baby was fine. Yes, he was crying.
Yeah.
Babies cry.
Babies cry.
know,
Yes.
It was in a safe place. It was in its pen or
Yeah.
But
his
can you
bed or
imagine
whatever.
Snape? Can you imagine Snape picking up like Harry and like comforting him, like cuddling him? Like it's like I cannot imagine.
Mm-mm.
No.
I mean, and certainly not, like, let's say, for argument's sake, that this happened this way, that he actually was there on the scene. Like, you see somebody die, especially if they were once your best friend, you're in shock. You might not even notice that there's a baby there, you know?
Mhm.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
He should have stepped on it. No, I'm just kidding.
Not over it.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I don't like Jones enough that I wouldn't necessarily be bothered.
All right. The last note I have is that Alan saying always does get me. I knew always was coming and I wanted to hear it in Alan's voice and I got it in Alan's voice and I am satisfied. And yeah, that's about it for what I have on notes on this film. Yeah. And I gotta go, you guys. I've had a blast as always. So thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. It was great.
Thanks for joining, Dal. Nice to hear you after forever.
Yep. I'll be around more later. And yeah, great. I'll catch y'all again next time.
Cool.
Thanks, Hal.
Enjoyed it.
Bye.
Yeah, we don't have a whole lot more. I was sort of interested in David Yates's choice to tell this tale in a nonlinear fashion,
Mm-hmm.
intercutting it with the later meeting of Snape with Dumbledore saying that, oh, Harry has to die.
Yeah.
I think that was specifically for the movie to get that anticlimactic scene and then be like, Harry's out of it. When really the fact that he was meant to die should have been the last thing.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Because that's what Harry's meant to get out of it. Like, Snape's memories are sort of a linear fashion because he was dying. Like, yes, they were like, he chose them, but at the same time, they were meant to make Harry understand. The focus was, Harry, unfortunately, you need to die, and I was always on your side. Not, Harry, you need to die, but I was in love with your mom.
Right.
Right.
Not confessional
Uh-huh.
time.
That would kind of make him an asshole, though, when you think about it. Like, okay, yeah, you need to die, but you need to know about my man pain right now.
Am I the asshole?
And looking at it that way, I can kind of see where people get the whole incel thing. Like, I don't think that the people making the movies meant to frame it that way, but it's absurd to the point where I could see where somebody could come to that conclusion.
Right.
Definitely.
But I also like the non-linear show of the memories because I think it's more impactful.
Yeah.
It's really like this big scene, like everything is like revealed one by one, and at the end, like you finish with the necessity of Harry's death. I think it was really impactful, and I think it actually moved the plot along in a nice way because like after that, Harry is like walking to his death. So
Yeah.
I think like from a movie perspective, it was a powerful scene, but I didn't like the selection of the memes at all.
Right. Another thing I do like about the concept of it being nonlinear is that it kind of carries this implication of Snape's been ruminating over these thoughts his whole life and is kind of piecing them together to make sense out of them so that they might come out nonlinear when he's dying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I always, and this isn't really the movies, this is the books. How the hell was he supposed to get these memories to Harry in a way that he would accept them, except in his dying,
Maybe he anticipated dying. As much as it was shock and horror, I think that he's the kind of person who would have prepared for every eventuality.
He probably didn't want to die with a big fucking snake, but
Right.
I think he anticipated dying because like he was playing a dangerous game and he knew it. Like I like to think that he had a plan to give the memories to Harry. Like I like to imagine he was going to pull off something like what he did with the sword, maybe lure Harry in with the Patronus. I think he had a plan.
I agree with that.
Because before the scene, we know that like Snape is not in the fight. Like I think he was looking for Harry all over the Hogwarts and the grounds.
Which is why he's so desperate to tell the landlord, I'll find Harry for you.
Yeah, he's really begging Voldemort to like go looking for Harry. But I think he had a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe even multiple backup plans.
Yeah, like I once read a film, like fan fiction, where he hid the copies of memories in Dumbledore's office, like headmaster's office. And Harry was discovering it. I don't remember how, but like he was luring him into the headmaster's office, and he didn't die in that fiction, thankfully. So like I like to think that he had a similar plan
I agree.
for him to have the memories, because otherwise like it seems so coincidental that Harry had the memories, but it was essential.
Yeah.
Like, what if he died? What if before Harry reached the Shrieking Shack? What if Harry was never there? You know, like
Right.
it's like unthinkable for me to think that Snape wouldn't have a backup plan.
I mean, honestly, that's a great argument for why he actually didn't die. He just pretended to and then fucked off somewhere.
Yeah.
It's canon.
Only fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, his death in canon is ambiguous, I'd say.
Yeah, I actually
Exactly.
agree with that. Jokes aside.
Did they find his body later on? No mention.
No mention of it, no.
I like to believe he's still alive. He's alive.
So yeah, he did fuck off somewhere.
100%.
Like I like to imagine him in a like sunbathing in a tropical island.
Oh
with
yes.
a margarita in his hand, like with little like umbrellas on it. Like that's my headcanon.
Oh yeah. Okay. Any last thoughts?
I definitely like this format for an episode. Like, it was a lot of fun. I wouldn't mind doing, if not about the movies, just deep dives into different, parts of canon. Like, that's been really fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been really fun with everybody. And, yes, Alan was technically too old, but I think he brought a lot of iconic moves to the role.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, in the long run, there could be more adaptations of Harry Potter in the future, and we might get like different, like all kinds of different Snapes. And I think that, we're always going to remember Alan Rickman is one of those.
Right.
If that happens and we have more book accurate versions of Snape, I don't think that would diminish these movies at all.
No.
No, they wouldn't, because there's something magical about being the first and being like so eye-opening visualization, even if it's not accurate, the visualization of the magical world for the first time, it will always be like an impactful movie and an important part, because in a way all others would draw from it.
Well, and I see people, when people are hypothesizing about like a new adaptation, that people are like, oh, I couldn't see it because nobody could ever replace Alan. But the thing is that even if that happens, we don't lose the first movies. They're still there to come back to.
Yeah.
About Argo, there's a bit more like Alan is as Alan and Snape, Snape, but I feel like it would be much harder sort of to find someone as Daniel Rofford and Emma.
Yeah, it will be hard to find someone who could like live up to Alan's portrayal, because even people who don't like book Snape, like they love Alan's portrayal of Snape. So like I can like understand there will be a pressure for someone to play Snape after such a legendary, like performance.
I agree that you could say that about other characters as well, because even though like Maggie Smith also looked quite a bit older than Minerva's book description, like she did a great job.
Oh yes, when those two were fighting, it was like they were emoting at each other. It was kind of cool.
Well, yeah, I was saying earlier, like I do think that the headcanon of Snape and Minerva is like kind of like besties. A lot of that comes from the movies, and I love that headcanon. So
I think there's also like some hints that they bet on Quidditch. Is it in the book,
right,
or is it fanon?
I feel like that's in the book, but like again, there's so many things where fanon and canon like blends together in your head.
Sure,
after
but
a
like
while.
I think in the books like there's like some hints here and there,
I
but
think
also
so.
we see that like Minerva is not actually very fond of Snape because of his favoritism and his hatred for Gryffindors. But I think that like they're a little bit stern, and they put like some distance between themselves in front of other students, but like behind doors, like in the staff room, they're like really besties who like to roast each other, like that kind of dynamic.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think you can see that he was so reluctant in the movie. That's the fight scene between them. He's like deflecting all her spells. He's not doing a single offensive one.
Yeah, he's so reluctant to actually do anything that could hurt her. So it's obvious that he cares about her.
Mind you, that scene is so emotional and so impactful. I can only see behind the scenes where he hits his hand. For me, like that's the oldest. He's going back and back, and he hits his hand on the camera, and that's all I can see now. The blooper, which is hilarious, but it's also a thing. Like in a way, like Minerva doesn't really accuses him like Harry does, which Harry's accusation is a bit, it's out of grief, but at the same time, that meme Dumbledore stood in all school. Do you want me to float?
Minerva is like more shocked by the news of Snape's like betrayal. Because like she's not like, yeah, I knew like he was always bad news. He was not like this. Like she's truly shocked, and like she questions Harry about like, did you see like correctly? Like, are you sure? Like she doesn't want to believe. You can see that in the book. And like she's not immediately jumping into like, yeah, he's a bad guy, like we always knew like he was not good news or anything like that. I think like he's like genuinely shocked by the news of Snape killing Dumbledore.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is probably a good place to stop. I sure thank everybody for hanging out for 2.5 hours again.
Thank you for having us.
really enjoyed, like the time was flying. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, same.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Oh, you bet.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Irem, is that how you say
yes.
your name? And Amelia,
Yes, it's Amelia.
thank you both for coming.
Thank you for inviting us. We really had fun.
Yes, thank you, Kat.
And thank you, Masao the dog.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes.
Nice to see you again after so long, Masao.
Yeah. Nice to see you again too.
That's cool that y'all know each other already.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that Masao is now a regular host.
Oh yeah, I need to get my stuff to you. Sorry, it's been such a horrible month for me.
Oh, that's all right. It's just finally made it official.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yay.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yay.
Alrighty. Well, everybody have a good one. I'll have this out before long.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you
Yeah.
much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And there you have it. Thanks to Amelia, Irem, Hal, and Masao for joining me for that amazing discussion. Check out our additional reading page at snapechatpodcast.com for links to the videos mentioned, as well as stories and more. And here we must say goodbye. We wish we didn't have to, but it hasn't escaped our notice that life isn't fair. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Tumblr and Twitter, or leave a comment on our website at snapechatpodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Many thanks to Nix for our continued work on our website. Support us on Ko-fi to help defray costs of production. That's ko-fi.com. Be sure to check out Care of Magical Shippers podcast and alwayssnape.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay snarky.